Hello, my name is Martha, I am 36 years old, and today I want to share a story with you that happened some time ago and really affected me. I promise you that every detail is important. Be careful, for this experience left teachings in my memory that remain alive to this date. And if you enjoy such tales, subscribe and leave a like by pressing the bell, so as not to miss the continuation. Tales well, let's continue the story without further ado. Firstly, let me tell you some more about myself and what is happening in my life at this very moment. I consider myself a complete and contented person in many ways. I am married and happily devoted to my husband, whom I love deeply. I live a quiet life, and I am a woman of average height, fair skin, and, as my husband would say, quite attractive. Although I am a faithful woman and have never cheated on my husband, I must admit that from time to time, just like anyone, I have had my moments of fantasy, which up until now always remained in the imagination. A couple of friends, Luis and Laura, also appear in this story. They are virtually family-oriented. We've known them since they were teenagers for many years and established a bond of mutual trust and affection. As we are living in the same colony, we are normally able to drop in on each other quite often and also feel like extended relatives of their children. We have two children, Daniela, 16 years old, and Sebastian, 18. Because of the great time spent together, they share so much with us that they consider us uncles, sometimes calling us as such, since they have always seen us. The situation with which this story begins occurred when our friends Luis and Laura went on a trip for a couple of weeks. They asked us the favor of passing by the guys from time to time to make sure they were all right. My husband works out of town and doesn't come back until the fifth day. On this occasion, only I could visit them. I love taking care of them and doing for them what they need. So I didn't think twice about supporting them while his parents were gone. One day I decided to go to his house to see how they were doing. When I arrived, I met Sebastian alone watching, as his sister was in class and due later. He invited me to watch the program with him. Without much work to do, I agreed. We went to the sitting room, prepared to watch the program, unaware that that was to be a day no one present would ever forget. We were in the room, watching some program, when I noticed Sebastian acting a little nervous, trying to keep up the conversation, but every now and then would look aside and blush. I didn't want to give it more importance, thinking that perhaps he was distracted or going through some situation as an adolescent. However, his nervousness was notable, and after a few minutes, he decided to tell me that there was something important he wanted to tell me. He looked at me, motionless, and then, as if he had difficulty pronouncing the words, he started telling me that he has a personal problem. Sebastian took a deep breath and, somewhat embarrassed, confessed to me that he had never had the opportunity to get to know up close the intimacy of a woman, which caused her insecurity and even ridicule. He asked me to help him understand certain things about the female body, and thinking that everything I show or explain to him would stay between us, asked me not to consider it something strange, but a way to help him in such a moment of uncertainty. And then, very deep inside, my doubts as to how far to go, looked for ways to come to a sensible conclusion without overstepping the mark in trying to help. Of course, my first impulse was to decline his request, since I managed to imagine myself in a difficult situation, misunderstood, at a time when, while he was looking at me with limpid eyes, assuring me that I kept one secret and that I did not want to put myself in a difficult position, I couldn't help but feel compassion for his vulnerability and remember how important it is in this phase of his life to have a point of reference to believe in. I finally agreed to talk a little more about the subject, reminding him that I would set some boundaries so that we would both be calm. The first time I went to visit Sebastian when his parents were away, I thought it would be a brief and silent visit like all the others. He was alone in the living room when I came in watching TV, and he sat next to me in a chair, with a nervous smile. He then proceeded to tell me all that had crossed his mind after our last conversation. I felt that this time, he should be less affirmative, but to my surprise, he said that he still had many doubts and trusted me to help him find the solutions. Trying to take things calmly, I told him that changes he had gone through were normal, and he shouldn't rush for no reason, but he insisted that even though he knew it, he had to take his own. While I was very curious, and his friends put some pressure on me, He explained to me with a mix of shyness and frankness that what sets him apart is not having such an experience. His gaze told me how much that means to him, and there I found myself at a crossroads, wanting to help him to feel confident but, without knowing how to do it, without inappropriate boundaries. I dipped the topic by pointing out the importance of developing self-confidence and suggesting that your worth should not be measured by experiences that others might want others to have. Instead, Sebastian asked me to show him something that would help him understand what was bothering him so much. The seriousness of his expression took me by surprise. I had deep doubts, and it was at that moment that I felt a mixture of surprise and curiosity. I needed to either categorically reject him and make it clear that he was out of place, or try to understand that he was so embarrassed. I said once again that our relationship should be conducted within the framework of respect and mutual trust. He promised me that he needed but a pinch of trust from me and that he would never bring it up with anybody else, so without ever stopping to feel great insecurity, I did this symbolic act, something that wouldn't violate any boundaries, just to let him know that his trust meant something to me. I forewarned him not to expect more than just a simple gesture with no aftermath. For this, I agreed to show him my confidence. In that small show of relief and surprise, Sebastian thanked me, shyly, with a smile, and in that moment, I realized how important it was for him to be able to feel safe. Leaving that first meeting, I found myself returning home in silence, my mind processing what had happened, trying to comprehend my reactions. In my mind's eye, I replayed every word, every glance. I pondered over and over whether I really had done the right thing in giving in to Sebastian's little request. It was a time of self-discovery, reflecting not only on their emotions, but also on the limitations I had placed on myself. Regarding the night I tried to sleep, the boy's words played in my mind. His candidness and vulnerability made me realize that sometimes adults do not take seriously the difficult situation the young people go through. I remembered going through such a stage of fear and doubt at some point and looking for someone who could understand me. I was so empathetic that it made me realize that, though fragile, he was searching for an answer amidst her confusion. The next day, I decided that I knew this relationship needed to stay on the plane, where there was safety and health, both for him and for me. But deep down, he needed someone who could be there for him and hopefully show him the way, but more importantly, not judge him. It was a role that I wanted to play in his life. Setting boundaries for interactions with him in the future actually took me a while, not just to protect him, but to protect myself too. It made me question to what extent a person should get emotionally involved with helping others without losing respect. That day showed me another side Sebastian earlier unknown to me, a deeply reflective young man full of questions, with his intense and turbulent emotions, which I couldn't yet understand. I started seeing in him not only a boy whom I had known since childhood, but also a person in quest of his place in this world, just like me. It made me reflect upon my role in his life and how delicate this mission was for me, because I had to give him a positive orientation without crossing inappropriate barriers. Finally, I promised myself that from now on, I would approach him with clarity in every relationship and firmness. I have learned that any good trusting relationship needs to have clearly defined boundaries, and while compassion and understanding are important, it is equally important to keep that sense of responsibility going. Further, this episode reminded me that even during the closest moment of intimacy, our values and respect for others are things that we should never leave behind. As time went by, what happened to Sebastian never left my mind. I decided that it was better not to interfere with such a questionable situation where my emotions and, mainly, my boundaries could be vulnerable. I knew giving in to his request was wrong, yet I understood that what happened did not define the kind of person I was, rather that it had to be learned from and taken as a step toward finding out where the limits were that I set for myself. Then, I realized that I needed to have a word with Sebastian and explain to him how I felt. I had to stop any dynamic that might get us into strange situations. I wanted him to understand my aim was good, to really want to help him, but this help cannot go beyond certain limits. Well, it wasn't an easy process. I knew that words could hurt, but in that moment, the priority was to safeguard our relationship and avoid misunderstandings in the future. When we finally met, I expressed my thoughts in a cold yet firm manner. I talked to him about mutual respect in any relationship and the dire consequences that impulsive actions can bring. I showed him that I had always wanted to guide him, to support him, but I could not distort the relationship in that way. Sebastian listened attentively. Although it was notorious that I was hurt, too, I realized that I did understand how important my words were. The conversation has not been easy so far for either of us. What relieved me was noticing that, notwithstanding the discomfort, we managed to respect each other. Grateful for my honesty, Sebastian thanked me. His face still reflected a wide spectrum of confusion and sadness at that moment, but I knew even though things had gone hard, I had learned something about limitation and respect, the importance of acting responsibly in any relationship. It changed the situation between Sebastian and me, but not for worse. A new understanding was born. While it was necessary that this emotional distance was there, we both knew that what happened was no mistake, it was an opportunity to grow. The most profound reflection that came into my mind was, sometimes, the worst moments do teach the most important lesson about ourselves. The important lesson was that we adults have a responsibility to set limits, not only for protection, but also for the good of others. My relationship with Sebastian remained close but much healthier, because both knew what was acceptable and what was not. The more time passed, the more grateful I became for whatever happened, as this was a chance for me to go through such a situation and reflect upon what my boundary setting was, how good I was at taking care of myself, teaching others lessons step by step, each improved and improved into a better version that could say no when necessary. Be honest with yourself. Gradually, it came to me that self-understanding is really the key to really helping those who love us. What I remember more than anything else, in the end, is how imperative it is to have those hard conversations, to be honest with ourselves and others around us, never letting feelings or desires cloud our judgment. Through these experiences, I come to understand that compassion goes hand in glove with respect, while the key to any durable relationship, family, friendship, or loving communication is just simply keeping healthy and open communication. All this, as I reflected upon, reassured me with the conviction that even if I made mistakes, I learned and grew as a human being. Either at one point or another in your life, where you couldn't set boundaries, or you get caught up in a dynamic that just wasn't good for you. Let me remind you of something very important: your well-being must come first. Be unafraid to be honest with yourself and others. Talk about how you feel, set boundaries, and this will not only protect you, but make room for healthier, more authentic relationships. Remember that you are the one who must determine what is acceptable for you. And this decision is the key to your peace of mind. So, I encourage you to reflect upon your own relationships and the way you are communicating. If there is something you need to change, take the first step right away. Sometimes the most difficult conversations are necessary in order for people to learn and grow, and not wait for things to get worse. Act now and set those boundaries. More importantly, be true to thine own self. At the end of it all, in fact, the only thing over which you really exercise control is your health, and that is solely personal and subjective. You deserve to live with dignity and integrity,